Hello, I'm here with my friend Andrea Terzi, a professor of economics from Franklin University, Switzerland. Andrea, thank you for joining me today. You will be presenting a paper here at Grenoble. Would you like to describe it in general, what the main points are?
Yeah, this paper is about the euro crisis, and I believe the starting point is there is a large agreement these days that the euro is ill-equipped for growth, and it's also ill-equipped for stability. So the euro system is failing on both grounds, growth and stability. And what I see these days is 19 million people unemployed. That's the conservative count in the Eurozone, and 26 million people unemployed in the European Union at large, and that's also a conservative count. And in this conference in Grenoble, we're now discussing how to reach full employment, whether with the euro or without the euro. Well, this gives you a little bit of a premise of my paper, perhaps, but I think it's a good background to see where I'm coming from. And the way I'm taking is I'm considering ending the euro, leaving the euro, a potential deadly blow for Europe. So I'm very much interested in my research to explore ways to save the euro and respond to the question of this conference is, yes, full employment with the euro is possible, and it is technically possible. I don't know if it's politically possible, but it is technically possible.
What do you think is needed to do technically? We'll get to the politics in a moment, but
right.
I agree that they're hard to separate. But if you were the finance minister of Europe, the United States of Europe today, what would you be doing?
Well, I can jump to my, my proposal, that I think might be a way to get out of the current stagnation with as little political change as possible. That's probably the challenge these days, and this is consider the European Council meeting over a weekend, and assessing genuinely the depth of the euro crisis, and addressing for the first time the question of a lack of aggregate demand in a way, but also in a more general language, a lack of money in circulation, and addressing this question in the following way. They agree on a across-the-board cut of VAT, value-added taxes, across all Europe or the Eurozone. And in my rough calculation, I think they would probably need a 50% cut, meaning that in those countries where VAT is 22% would be cut to 11, or 18 or 9, and so forth. And this would have two consequences. One is to reduce overall taxation well below government spending in the Eurozone, and would generate that fuel that is needed. In a recent book that I wrote, I draw this difference between fuel and oil. Mm-hmm. Oil and engine is just to avoid that the engine blows up or melts, but doesn't help the engine run faster. And that's what the European Central Bank has been doing, putting more and more oil into the engine to prevent implosion. The fuel is coming from the fiscal channel, and the fuel would be cutting tax revenue, as I say, well below government spending. The other effect, of course, would be that countries will lose funding. So the response to this would be an issue of Eurobonds, perhaps issued by the ESM but backed by the ECB, that will collect and fund this tax cut across Europe. And so funding countries pro quota. It doesn't really need to create a transfer union, really, at this point, at this stage. So this would be a pro quota, and the inevitable deficit would be created initially, would not count into the fiscal compact. That's my technical solution. And it doesn't have to be exactly this way. I mean, I think the important thing is the politics of Europe understand the nature of the problem and moves somehow in this direction. This is not the only way.
Because at least publicly, with the constant embrace of fiscal austerity, you wonder whether the policymakers in Brussels actually understand the nature of the problem. But I don't know if that's political posturing or if they actually really do understand that.
Yeah. Yes, that's hard to
hard to gauge.
Hard to yes. What they're doing, they're basically using a wrong model. And what's happening now, and what's wrong about the current policy is that the current policy stance builds on encouraging households to spend more, firms to invest more, banks to lend more, basically forcing people to do what they really don't think it's profitable or it's not in their interest to do. And they believe that they can achieve this by building confidence. There is also a lot of discussion about reducing the divergence. This question of divergence is kind of puzzling to me. The notion of a monetary union is in fact to, I mean, the challenge is to how to manage divergence in a politically sustainable way.
It's easy to do when you have a unified fiscal policy. You can't seem to do it through monetary policy alone.
Yeah. You don't care very much about divergence in the 50 states of the US, and they do diverge. And interestingly, they especially diverge during deep recessions. If you look at the unemployment rate state by state, you see a much wider spread during the 2008 recession, 2009, rather than in periods of prosperity. So it doesn't surprise me that in the deepest recession since the Great Depression, unemployment rates in the Eurozone are so different.
And I would agree with you about that there's always often talk about or fixation on current account imbalances, and of course,
yes.
If you are dealing with what should be a genuine political monetary union, then, as you say, that shouldn't be relevant. I mean, nobody knows, for example, whether Texas runs a current account surplus with the other 49 states.
I wouldn't know where to find the numbers.
No, and yet somehow, so it doesn't really matter. It's not that Germany runs such a huge current account surplus relative to the other countries. It's just that there is no countervailing fiscal response to offset that. There's no kind of regional transfers to offset that disparity.
Yes, yes. And the response that is being given is things like internal devaluation and structural reforms to
which is a classic neoclassical mistake, because of course they say you reduce the labor input costs, and of course you bring back competitiveness, forgetting that labor is also a source of demand.
And it's like two stores facing the same street, and people in the streets are just very few passing by, and those few that pass by have little money. But perhaps one of the stores sells a better product, so they get along, and the other is in crisis. But you don't improve the situation by simply by making the store that is selling the inferior good making some progress in the quality. All that you get is they will divide a pie differently, but the pie is still the same size. I mean, the response would be to get more people passing by the street or giving more money to those people passing by the streets.
And you can't really do that through monetary policy. I mean, I want to go back to your analogy earlier. You talked about the fuel and about the gas and oil, for example. Now, Mario Draghi, when he made his speech that he would do whatever it takes to preserve the monetary union, we've talked about this before, but in a sense, it worked as a confidence trick because it's the first time you had the currency issuer actually promising to backstop the bonds as opposed to an institution with a finite balance sheet. That didn't deal with the problem of aggregate demand, but it seems to have dealt with the solvency problem to some extent.
Absolutely, and in fact, that was the only way that the funding crisis could be stopped. I mean, in fact, the funding crisis stopped escalating as soon as Draghi said that, and that was a very important turning point in the crisis.
In fact, you said to me that you thought that he crossed the Rubicon. That even though he ultimately introduced some fiscal conditionality, that you felt that it would be impossible for them not to continue to.
It's interesting that he agreed to do this after 14 years of ECB, and where people really had questions that ECB would ever take that step. And I just wondered personally, out of curiosity, whether they always thought they could do that, and they didn't want to share that idea for basically for a moral hazard question. But also, I think that the agreement on the fiscal compact was the necessary condition for Draghi to go that way. So he needed some.
He needed political cover.
Political cover, right.
Which is why I find this talk about quantitative easing so interesting, because like you, I don't feel that will add to overall aggregate demand, but I wonder whether the promise or the discussion of quantitative easing is the way of providing further political cover to backstop those bonds without actually introducing any kind of fiscal conditionality.
Yeah, well, that goes back to my paper. I think there's a very important difference that perhaps has not been noticed sufficiently enough between the ECB monetary policy and basically virtually every other central bank in the world. Every central bank in the world deals with government securities. And what they do, basically, they are the market makers of government securities, meaning they have the power to buy and sell government securities, which is normally called open market operations, which they do at the chosen policy rate. So basically, they choose a policy rate. It might be 3%, might be 5%, might be 8%. And this will translate into the yield of Treasury securities. Normally, central banks deal with very short, Treasury bills in the States. In principle, they could do. In fact, the Fed has been doing this for longer maturities during the crisis. But that's what they do. The ECB does not do this. The ECB refinances banks with the weekly auctions. And they never really buy or sell government securities except for very special operations, including the securities market program, which was temporary and was limited. What they do, they accept government securities as collateral with haircut. So basically, they leave to the market the price of government securities entirely. And they use them as collateral to refinance the banks, which means that the Central Bank of Europe has no real power to be the market maker of government securities. With the whatever it takes announcement, Draghi changed this and said, we will become the market maker, which, by the way, is the same thing that the Fed does. I mean, if the Fed doesn't, the Fed is not a market maker of municipal bonds, of course, and so the ECB is not the market maker of national government securities. And with the whatever it takes announcement, it basically said, yes, we're ready to do that, but of course, on condition.
So it's a start anyway, in the sense that you've had some progress on the monetary front, but we need to see more political progress on the fiscal front.
Right.
I wish we had more time to discuss it, but Andrea Terzi, thank you very much for coming to discuss this, and
Thank
I
you.
look forward to hearing
Thank you very
the
much.
paper tomorrow. Thank you very much.